Okay, so my name is Gareth. You're watching the Hub Online Network. Welcome, Jackie Tegart, to the show again. So tell us about how you've been over the last, how long has it been? A couple months since we've spoken?
Yeah, it's been a couple of months, and what an interesting couple of months it's been. The house was sitting in Victoria. We prepared to leave for a 2-week break, and we haven't been back since.
Wow.
And I think that that experience is not unusual for so many people during this COVID crisis. The biggest event when we left the house was the protests around the railways and the Wet'suwet'en. And we came home and COVID-19 started. And it's been quite a journey ever since then.
So going back to the pipeline, has there been any resolutions from that, or did COVID just kind of squash everything? And
I think COVID took over and has been the priority both of government and of British Columbians, trying to keep people safe and healthy and listening to Dr. Bonnie Henry give us the direction we need to be where we are today.
so has there been any involvement from you in how the government's been running?
Well, we made a decision right from day one that this was a health issue and this was a critically important health issue. And so, as a party, as an opposition party, we joined with Dr. Bonnie Henry and Minister Dix to look at how do we best deliver the message, how do we ensure that people are safe, and how do we support the actions taken by the public health officer. And so you'll see that our health critic, Norm Letnick, has been co-hosting meetings with Interior Health, town halls, those kinds of things, because we were very adamant right from day one that this was not an issue that you politicize. So we've been very supportive of the work of Dr. Henry, trying to get the message out on what her direction is. And I think that British Columbians have a lot to be proud of when you look at where we are today.
Um, how do you? Is there anything that you can say about how we've been doing things opposed to like Ontario or Quebec? Is there any major differences that you've seen?
Well, one of the things that we were very fortunate in British Columbia with, and it was just by luck, that our spring break was later than Quebec's,
Right.
and I do believe than Ontario's. And when you look at the outbreak in both of those provinces, it is reflective of the fact that spring break was earlier. People had traveled, they'd gone to Europe, they'd gone to New York City, and they came home, many of them, with COVID. And so we were very fortunate that our spring break came later, and Dr. Henry's direction was to not travel. And so I think that that put us in a good starting point when we look at our COVID strategy around how to flatten the curve.
Um, so the health things aside, some of the things that the NDP government has been doing in tandem with COVID is things like giving people $1,000, a one-time $1,000 stimulus, making sure that this might be more federal, but keeping the border shut down. What do the Liberals have to say about stuff like that?
Well, I think all of us recognize what a challenge it's been for people whose businesses are closed and whose employees are laid off. And so we're very supportive of programs that help keep people employed, that help keep people feeding their families and paying their rents. So, as much as you're very concerned about the health issues, we're also very concerned about the impact on families and on people's income. So as we look to recovery, we need to keep in mind that we have thousands of people in British Columbia who are unemployed, don't know how they're going to pay their rent on June 1st, and are struggling. And I think that we only have to look around our community and look at how many small businesses have been closed and how many people they employ to know that it's a challenge. And the federal government in particular has stepped up. And British Columbia has enhanced some of those programs from the federal government.
How do you feel that Ashcroft and Cache Creek specifically have been doing in light of this pandemic?
Well, I think that all of us have been challenged by the directives to stay home and to ensure that we don't spread or have a large group of people that we interact with. It's I think that the riding as a whole has been quite successful. We look at the numbers in interior health, and we've done very well. Of course, we had a situation in Cache Creek, which was handled quickly. And I think that people will say that there's good direction from public health and good support through interior health. So, as much as many people in our communities think it's not here, I would encourage people to remember that Dr. Bonnie Henry says, um, act like you have COVID.
Right.
Think about that as you expand your contacts and you expand your bubble of people. Think about the fact that you're inviting everyone that they have invited into their lives into yours. So, as much as we're anxious to get the economy back on track, we need to be cautious also that we don't reinvigorate COVID-19.
So that being said, so since all of this has been going on, there's been lots of debates about certain things. So where do you fall on the wear a mask, don't wear a mask debate?
I think it's public health has been pretty clear that, excuse me, you wear a mask to protect others. And so they have said it is your personal choice. Some places have said, as part of their safety plans to come into their place of business, they expect you to wear a mask. So I would say, excuse me, take a look at what the information is from the public health officer and make a personal choice. And don't make judgment on other people. It is a personal choice. Some people can't wear masks. And so we really need to be aware that that Dr. Bonnie Henry has said that if you're more comfortable wearing a mask, then do so. But if you keep your social distancing, you wash your hands, you do the steps that she's indicated, that should suffice also. So personally, I've worn a mask, but it's really people's personal choice at this point.
The other day on your Twitter, I saw you with a hashtag share hope not hate, I believe it was.
Yes.
Can you explain or tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we've seen such an increase in racial tension and in racial incidents, particularly at the coast, and particularly targeted at Asian people in regards to COVID. And I think it's critically important that we be very public about that not being acceptable behavior. We are Canadians, we are British Columbians. British Columbia is made up of many, many different ethnic groups. And I'm saddened by some of the actions that I've seen on TV and some of the incidences that have been reported, that we see elderly people being attacked on the street. We see people graffiti incidents at the coast, and that's not my Canada. So the Twitter process was to bring awareness and to remind people that there are neighbors, there are friends, they're fellow Canadians, and racism any place has no place in Canada.
So just as an aside to that, talking about racism and that kind of thing, have you been following what's been going on with this George Floyd situation in the States?
I've seen a little bit of it. It's absolutely devastating. And I think that we're in the midst of COVID. I think all of us are feeling a little out of sorts. There's tension, there's less interaction, less understanding of each other, more influence, I think, by media and social media. And I think what we're seeing in the States is absolutely appalling in regards to civil unrest and the racism down there.
So let's talk about schools.
Okay.
So we're talking about reopening schools up starting, I believe, Monday. We're talking about that. Can you tell us about what your thoughts are on? Are we opening schools up too soon? Are we in BC just at the right time to start doing stuff like this?
Well, the question I'm hearing from constituents is, what is school going to look like? Right. So it is important that parents feel that their children are safe in the schools. And I know that the school systems are working very hard to ensure that. But kids are kids. And so how do we ensure social distancing? How do we ensure the hand washing, the cough in your elbow, all those kinds of things? I know that school staffs have been working on this for quite some time. And I'm encouraged that the government has said it is optional because I know for some parents, they're very, very concerned about sending their kids to school and ensuring that the proper processes are in place and that their kids will follow those. So it's 1 month. It is part-time. It's parents' choice. But I've been impressed with the flexibility in the system and the also the choice that parents have to do distance learning if that's their choice. So it's I think education has become a priority for lots of families, perhaps in a new way, and we're seeing all kinds of opportunities to think about what education looks like for our own kids.
On a MLA level, are you working at all with School District 74 or any others in your riding about what they're doing?
No, I haven't. I haven't become involved in that. I'm certainly working on economic recovery with some of our communities, but the school system seems to be on track. We don't hear a lot from constituents, so I'm going to trust that things are being done well, and that if people have concerns, they'll approach us.
So what things have your committees that you're a part of been meeting virtually then?
Yes.
And what kinds of things have you been discussing in those groups?
Well, it's about finding the balance. We have done a very, very good job of staying at home, distancing ourselves, working from home. And now, as we open up, we need to show people that it is okay to come outside, to come into a business, that businesses have the appropriate safety plans as per the direction of the public health officer to ensure that there is a low risk for you to go into their business. Now, the other side of that is because we've done such a good job of encouraging people to stay home, many are hesitant to come out. And many are hesitant and think that government or communities are moving too fast to open up. But the other side of the coin is we have many unemployed people who are looking to go back to work, and many small businesses who have overhead costs that continue whether people come through their front door or not. And so it's a fine balancing act, and we're working hard to find that sweet spot in the balancing act. I've heard from people across the riding who say we don't want visitors because we're safe here. We don't have COVID here. And my question is, Dr. Bonnie Henry says, assume COVID is everywhere. And there is no one community that is safe from everything. And so how do we make sure that processes are in place to ensure that we're at the lowest risk we possibly can be at as we slowly open the economy? And that's mostly what I'm hearing about. And what I hear also is, as communities open up, people are fearful, and we have to hear their voices, and we have to ensure that we address their concerns. So we're working on a daily basis to do that.
So here we are. We're just either going into phase 2, or we just started phase 2 of our reopening and economic development and that sort of stuff. What do you see happening moving forward? So, for example, I've heard the terms depression, recession thrown around quite a bit. So what are you seeing on an MLA level? Are we moving in that direction, or are we looking like we're going to come out of this in a positive note?
I'm always an optimist. I would be the first one to say that Dr. Bonnie Henry and Minister Dix have done a great job around the health issue. As we go into phase 2, we need to look at not just the health issue, we need to continue with that, but we need to look at the impact on our economy. And we need to look at what that means to each of our communities and our business sector. We've been pretty fortunate in so many areas of the riding that employers have been quite generous. They've sent people home in order to have the social distancing, but have continued to pay them. That is not the norm in every community. And so we need to think about our friends and neighbors who are sitting at home, seeing the third month of rent due, or the third mortgage payment due, and no income coming in. They may have gotten the $2,000 through the federal government and the extra $1,000, but they're falling behind, and they're wanting to go to work. And so how do we do the plan to move forward to get the economy going again? But I can tell you, as a region that went through the fires, we've seen floods, and again this year we saw floods. We've seen small businesses that have yet to recover from 2017, and they're struggling. And I think one of the things that COVID has done is made all of us realize the importance of the services that we have in our own community. When you're asked not to drive out of your community except for essential services, it makes you realize how important things like hardware stores, things like drugstores, local newspapers, how important those stores are to who we are as a community. And I certainly hope during the COVID that we all have had conversations around our dinner tables about how important it is that we support these small businesses. So I'm concerned, of course, about how many small businesses will be able to survive. We're hearing that if we go into a second round of COVID-19 in the fall, and the prediction is that it may be worse than it was in the spring, that will devastate our small businesses, and it will devastate our economy. And I'm not sure what that looks like. I think all of us are working very hard to try and minimize the impact, but I have yet to see a comprehensive plan from government. And it is critically important that the rules be clear, that somebody knows what the rules are as they attempt to open their business. One of the things that we've done as opposition is sent a number of letters to the Premier outlining what we think would help open up the economy. Things like a holiday from PST, things like the employer health tax being put off for 90 days, things like the minimum wage increase. Now is not the time. How do we minimize the cost, the governmental cost to small business in order to get small businesses up and running, and in order for those small businesses to get their employees back in their doors and at work? And that's what a recovery plan needs to look like. And each of the communities, that have contacted me certainly are looking for strategies around that. But one of the things I hear constantly is it's not clear what the rules are. And that lack of clarity and that concern that I've done my safety plan, I've opened my store, but I'm not sure if someone comes in and says, you haven't thought about this, and reports me, what that'll mean to my small business, because the rules are so fluid and it's hard to get a straight answer. And that uncertainty is very tough for our small businesses.
Normally, when laws are created and things are put through in the legislative assembly, how long does it take for a standard bill to be thought of, put out there, changed as many times as it needed to be changed through the committees, and then put into law?
Well, normally it's I would say a 6 to 9 month process. What we're seeing here is a state of emergency,
Right.
and the government being given special ability to deal with the state of emergency, and also the public health officer having the power to make decisions based on her expertise around public health. So between the two, that's where sometimes where the lack of clarity comes. Is one day we hear drive-ins, commercial drive-ins are okay, and pop-up drive-ins are only allowed 50 cars. The next day we hear, no, everybody, it's only 50 cars. Like when you talk to businesses, their frustration is, I want to open, I want to follow the rules, but I can't get clarity on what the rules are.
Right.
So it's a tough one, and it's something that government needs to address quickly.
So these new rules are sort of being not cobbled together, because they are professionals that are putting these rules into place.
Yeah.
But do you see over the course of the summer rules getting stricter or more, like as businesses open, do you feel that there's going to be instances where they go, okay, this has now happened, we need to enforce stricter rules, or do you think that we're going to move into more easings as we move forward?
Well, I think it very much depends on the numbers.
Right.
And I think it depends on how we do with the numbers of new cases. And we are coming up to the second week after the going into phase 2, where we were able to increase our bubble and socialize a little bit more. And some of our businesses have begun to open. And so we'll be watching the numbers very closely, as I'm sure Dr. Henry will. And I think that depending on what happens there, we will see a reaction to numbers that increase.
So I was watching Premier John Horgan's statement on the 27th, so just a couple days ago. He was saying that they're extending the state of emergency for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that this is now the longest period of state of emergency that BC has ever been in. Do you feel that we are going to be seeing this extended past the next 2 weeks?
Well, I couldn't tell you for sure. It very much is the government's purview to decide that. The state of emergency has been important up to today, and I would expect that 2 weeks hence, we will be in a different place, and it may be that the state of emergency can stop. So it really is a very fluid situation, and it really does depend on numbers. As we said, they've done a fairly good job about the health issues and about dealing with the public health based on science. But as we move to the next phase, the health issues are as under control, I think, as we can expect. Now we move into how do we open up based on the directives from Dr. Bonnie Henry and based on the decisions made by government. And so as an opposition, those are the questions that we'll have for government as we go back into the session.
And that being said, again, back to Premier John Horgan's speech the other day, he was talking about the Legislative Assembly getting back to it in, I want to, June something, I forget the exact date that they're talking about.
June 22nd.
Yes, thank you. It sounds like he's open to people being virtually attending and being there in person. Are you planning on going back to the building? Or are you planning on doing it over your computer?
I'm planning on going back to the building at least for part of it. The thing is that I can drive there in my car by myself. I can stay in the car on the ferry, and I have accommodation there. So I can be as safe there as I can be at home.
Right.
And that's really important to me. We need to follow the guidelines of the public health officer. And so when I assess whether to do it via Zoom or to be in the building, at this point, I plan on going down to Victoria. That's, that's a personal decision. And they are offering a hybrid model where some will be at home because of concerns around travel, perhaps compromised immune systems, family issues, etc. And so they've provided a very flexible opportunity, but I plan on going down.
So some bigger topics that have been coming up over the last couple of months has been broadband in rural areas. There's a couple more that we'll get to, but let's talk about broadband. Is that something that falls that the provincial government has some kind of influence on? Is that something that they're pushing for?
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you that we have been advocating for internet access and broadband for years. I think it has been particularly highlighted during this time of COVID, as we all have connected with family via FaceTime and Zoom and all kinds of other platforms. People have become very, very well versed in how to use technology to connect with others. And we've certainly seen some gaps in service. The other thing is it's not just for connecting family to family, friend to friend. It's about doing your business. It's about educating your children. It's the new world. And so if nothing else has happened, COVID has just highlighted how important broadband is and how disadvantaged some of our communities are in regards to their access to broadband.
Because this just popped in my head, one sad thing that has happened since COVID, and another sad thing, because it's really been a litany of sort of weird things that just keep happening and happening and happening. But this was the snowbird crash.
Yes.
Um, and I bring this up because I follow you on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I see that you were retweeting a bunch of stuff about it. So I just wanted to know if you had some kind of something you wanted to say in regards to that.
Pretty devastating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you able to? I don't know how much you've left your home. Were you able to, or did you watch the drum circles that were going on at the not the crash site, but at the airport in Kamloops?
Yes. Actually, Kamloops did an incredible job of the memorial.
The gentleman that was flying the plane has now gone home to Moose Jaw, but there was also another drum circle outside of the hospital that he was able to watch. Is Kamloops part of? No, Kamloops isn't part of your riding, is it?
No, no, my riding goes to just outside of Kamloops, but Skeetchus and Indian Band was part of the drum circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so,
So it shows how important those ceremonies are.
right?
The Legion also held a memorial ceremony.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, in Kamloops at the airport. But the other thing was it's difficult to have any kind of ceremony during COVID. And as much as people wanted to gather or want to, you can't.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges.
I keep having these interviews, and I keep wanting to say, let's pretend that COVID's not a thing. You know, what would the ideal situation be like? And it's just really interesting how you can't do that anymore. You can't
Yep.
pretend that it's not there. Um, but
Well, I think the other thing, Gareth, is that when it first started, many people talked about when we get back to normal.
right,
Well, I think that COVID has shown us that this is the new normal, that this isn't a 1 week or 2 week thing. We're now into month 3. We have all adjusted to staying at home and trying very hard to be aware of who's in our bubble and who we contact with, so that if we, God forbid, ever had to trace back, that we know who we've been around. I think that people have grown to understand the importance of that. We have an incredible respect for our seniors who have been particularly vulnerable during this time. Those people on the front lines who are doing the work every day. But you think about things like funerals, things like weddings, things like graduations that have a special historic kind of cultural feeling that all of us have an expectation of what that'll look like. And none of those things look like that anymore. And so, as much as some days you can think, oh my goodness, is it ever going to end? You need to look at some of the incredible things that have happened.
um, from before COVID to now, is there anything that could, in a positive way, like let's say this is the new normal and we don't want to go back to the old normal because the old normal, let's say, didn't work. Is there anything that we can change moving forward that will that we can better society with because COVID happened?
Well, it's interesting because I do a lot of outreach, and I was talking to someone who said, um, as I look out my window, it reminds me of being a kid in the 60s. He said, brothers and sisters are playing with each other. He said they're riding bikes and they're riding through the ditches and they're making trails and they're making forts out in the forest. And they're coming home at 5 o'clock when their mom's calling them in for dinner. And their mom goes to town once a week to grocery shop. She doesn't go 3 times a day. And he said, it just reminds me of the 1960s. And as I thought about that, I thought, we've been in this situation for a long enough period of time for many of us to rethink about what our normal was and all the things that were frenetic in our lives. And how important were they when we think about how where we live is so important, our health is so important, and our family is so important. So I think that COVID has given us all the opportunity to take a look at what is our new normal. What is that going to mean to me? And is it going to be slipping back into the old ways that had many people absolutely stressed to the max and feeling like they were on a treadmill that was going way too fast? COVID has given us the opportunity to slow down, to reconnect with those closest to us, and to have the conversation about, as we slowly go back, what is our going back going to look like?
Right.
So I don't know any other time in my history that we've had that opportunity. This is history making. To be a part of this, to see how we're reacting to it, and I think British Columbians have a lot to be proud of. Yes, there certainly are some situations that we've seen that we're not that proud of, but I can tell you, as a British Columbian, I think we've done well so far, and we just need to move forward and get people back to work and remove the stress of unemployment and the loss and feeling like you're behind the eight ball because you've been at home now for 3 months.
Well, that's a very good segue to the next topic, which is the possibility of universal basic income. Now, this might be more of a federal thing, but what are your thoughts on everybody getting a, I think it's the same amount as the CERB every month moving forward?
I think the situation is that whenever you put a program in place, you need to look at how you pay for it.
Right.
And I've heard hundreds of concerns from people across the riding talking about how are we going to pay for our COVID-19 support systems that we put in place. And I would suggest to you that we as a country would need to look very seriously whether what is affordable. And I would suspect that we are going to be looking at significant deficits, both federally and provincially. That is money that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket, and that is you and me.
Yep.
And that, so when we look at programs and we look at particularly universal programs, we need to look at the cost and we need to look at how do we generate the dollars in order to support that. And I would suggest to you that when we look at the deficit where we will be in as we move through COVID, we're going to have to have some very, very tough decisions.
Another thing that has been thrown around here recently is moving to a 4-day work week policy. Do you see how that would be beneficial or not?
Well, a 4-day work week, does that mean a 4-day work week with a 5-day pay?
So I believe it would be 4 days at 10-hour shifts.
Okay. I think that some people think that that would increase people's ability to be out and about and to help the economy move forward. I personally am reminded of my father-in-law who said to my husband at one point, 12-hour days? We went on strike to get an 8-hour day so that we could be at home with our families.
Right.
So when we look at options out there on how we can stimulate the economy, we also need to look at the unintended consequences. So a 4-day work week might work for some, but I don't believe it would work for everyone. But I think we need to be flexible so that people can take a look at their individual situation, and the employer and employees can do that together and make that decision together. I don't think that government should decree that there will be a 4-day work week, because it doesn't work for everybody.
What about the what was it? I'll come back. It'll come back to me. So we'll move on.
Okay.
Another big thing that has happened since last time we spoke was, of course, the shootings in Nova Scotia. And I hate to do this to you, but so that tragedy happened, and then the federal government put in the gun ban, ban. Where do you sit on that? And how does that affect the province, or does it affect MLAs in that level of government?
That's a federal government decision. And the situation in Nova Scotia was absolutely devastating. I think that, as we go through the COVID situation, we have expressed, and many people have expressed, concern about people's mental health. And not saying that that is the situation in Nova Scotia, but there's only so much people can take, and those sad situations are just devastating. And then again, to look at the impact of COVID on the ability to gather together, to celebrate lives, to be a community together. I've been so impressed with how communities and people have adapted and done what they need to do in order to honor and remember. So, like Nova Scotia was devastating, but I also think about how many deaths we've had in British Columbia and across the country, and how many families couldn't be there with their loved ones, how many couldn't hold a celebration of life like they would like to, and how many have adapted in order to do what they need to do to put their loved ones to rest. So it's you're always hopeful that we don't find those situations, but it's devastating as a country to have had that happen. And I think the outpour of concern and love was incredible.
And I do remember the question I had before that, which was, what are your thoughts on having 10 paid sick days instead of 5?
I certainly, Dr. Bonnie Henry has indicated that if you're sick, you should not be going to work. And we know that we have a number of employees whose employer is a small business and can't afford to pay 10 days sick pay. So it very much depends on where do we find that money, and how do we make sure that it's addressing the need. Because I think that the 10 days sick pay is in response to COVID incubation period. And so we need, as governments, to figure out how do we pay that rather than putting one more thing on the back of employers who are struggling right now. So it's a health issue, and it's up to government to find the answer to that. But I'm absolutely adamant that we should not be putting one more burden on small business or small employers.
So you and I have talked at great length about healthcare in our area. And one of the things, again, that John Horgan talked about on the 27th was the primary care network, and how they're hoping to expand that into the interior and that sort of thing. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how that's working or not working?
I don't have any information on that at this time, Gareth, but I'll see what I can find for our next interview.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
What else has been going on? So, what have you, since COVID started, what have you really been up to? Have you been home mostly, or have you done any kind of meetings, or have you traveled at all to any parts of your riding, or have you pretty much just stayed home?
Absolutely following Dr. Henry's advice. She's asked us to stay home, so I've stayed home.
Okay.
She's asked us to minimize the number of people that are in our bubble, and I've done that. I can tell you, when you live alone, isolation is a whole new experience. And I have a real empathy for seniors and others who live alone during this time, because, you know, when you're busy in the daytime and you're out and about doing the work like I do, going from community to community, and you come home at night, it's nice to come home to sometimes a quiet house. But a quiet house 24/7 is pretty darn quiet. So I've got a new empathy, and certainly would encourage anybody who knows someone who's living alone to reach out and actually give them a phone call. Those kinds of things are often the lifeline of a day. You know, oh, someone phoned me today. But I've been at home doing a lot of Zoom meetings, lots of interaction with different groups via Zoom. I I can tell you, sitting in front of a computer is not the same as meeting people in person. That is my preference, but that's not available to us right now. So the challenge of working from home is when you've got your dining room table as your workspace, it's sometimes tough to step away from it, because the work is endless. The people who are concerned, who are afraid, who are facing challenges that they've never faced before. We receive all those phone calls, and so our goal is to make sure we get back to them in a timely way. And so it's been lots of work from home, and I'm looking forward to going back to the legislature on the 22nd of June.
So right now, there's been a big drop in the amount of gas that's being used. Do you think that this might be a good time to push some more green initiatives?
I think that anything that'll help the economy, it's a good time to look at anything that'll help the economy. And certainly when we look at any new initiatives, green initiatives are a top priority. We only have to look at some of the satellite images of the difference in air quality when we shut communities down. And I have to say, you know, when we first started the COVID process, and they showed pictures of China and of Wuhan, it was almost surreal. I couldn't believe that something could shut down a community of more than many million people. And but that isn't sustainable. And so how do we, as we look at our new world, how do we ensure, as we open up and look at our new normal, how do we ensure that we minimize impact on the environment, the air, the water, and rethink perhaps what we've done in the past?
Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'd just like to say that, as you know, it's been challenging as an MLA. during COVID, because 90% of my work is being out in community. It's meeting with groups, it's meeting with different concerned constituents in their communities, at their homes, in their businesses. And so this has been a very, very different kind of 2 months. But we're here to help people. And don't ever hesitate to email or phone us. Our office is opening again on June 1st. We will have all the public health officers' criteria in place. But we know how important it is for the public to have access to us. For anybody who deals with our office, you'll know that an email will get answered 24/7 usually. And we do our best to make sure we get back to you. I want to say to people who are concerned about the speed in which we open up our communities again. There's two sides to this balance, and one side is the health side, which I think Dr. Henry has under control and has done a superb job at. The challenge now is for government to put together a very clear and comprehensive reopening plan so that people know when they can expect to go back to work, when they can expect things to open, and plan their life around that. We're going into the summer. The expectation is that COVID may be on a downswing for a while, but they also expect it to come back in the fall, along with the normal flus that come along. So how do we prepare ourselves for what that might look like? So I would suggest to you, when we're talking about what our future looks like, we're not talking about going back.
Right.
We're talking about envisioning something new, something that reflects what we've learned during COVID, and I believe something perhaps much more family-oriented and much different than we were before. So everybody has a comfort level for themselves. As I've said to many who have phoned me and said, you know, we shouldn't let strangers in our community. We all have personal choices. Bonnie Henry has told us we can stay at home, we can isolate ourselves, and we can go out when we feel comfortable. And so it's up to you to decide what your comfort level is, and when you start expanding your bubble. So please support local. Please remember that people are unemployed. Please remember that we have many in our community who don't know where their rent and food money is going to come from. So, and we have a great many seniors who have been extremely affected by the isolation and by the vulnerability of that segment of our population. And our seniors are much more than numbers. They're people. And so reach out and make someone's day today. Give them a phone call.
And I have one hypothetical question for you, and then I think that's good. We've almost been talking for an hour already. It went by really fast. But if things reopen here in the next couple of weeks and you had the option to travel to somewhere in British Columbia, where would that be?
You know, every place in British Columbia is beautiful. And, you know, you think, I could just throw a dart at a map and I would be happy to go there. But I think a visit to family first.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone that watched this video. That we've been chatting with Jackie Tegart, our local MLA for Fraser Nicola. And thank you for taking the time to do this with us today, and we look forward to doing another one in the near future.
Thank you, Gareth.